Everyone, I'm going to do an extended little introduction.
I think that is a fantastic idea.
So welcome. If everybody wants to take a seat. And for those who are joining us virtually, I want to welcome you again and invite you to grab a prayer book if you haven't already grabbed a prayer book. And in addition to that, for those who are joining us virtually, if you want, you can go on to the email confirmation that you got maybe, I think, Friday morning, which spoke about the different services and the links. And on there is a link to the prayer book as well, and you can find that. Or if you can't, you can Google CCAR Flip Book High Holidays. And that's how I originally found the prayer book as well. And that's going to be an exact clone of the prayer book that we're using. I got to say, this is one of my favorite services of the High Holy Day cycle. There's something that feels a little more casual about this service, something that feels even a little bit more musical about this service. And we're able to welcome some really wonderful partners onto the Bima, one of which is Perry Smilo, who we as adult members of the congregation don't get to pray with very much because she's often leading in her wonderful way out in the tent. Same, by the way, with Ronnie Pressman, who you're going to see throughout the course of the morning as well. And of course, Leora, which every time that she sings is wonderful. And so for those who are joining us virtually, who may not know who we are, I'm Rabbi Mark Katz, and this is Cantor Meredith Greenberg. And we're going to get started with a special rendition of a prayer all about the joy of gathering together. Ashrei yoshvei beitecha. Happy are those, God, who dwell in your house.
You'll learn it quickly.
Ashrei yoshvei beitecha, od yehalelu hasela. Ashrei yoshvei beitecha, od yehalelu hasela.
Ashrei, ashrei, ashrei yoshvei beitecha. Ashrei, ashrei, ashrei yoshvei beitecha.
Happy are those who dwell in your house. They will sing your praises forever. Happy are those who dwell in this house. They will sing your praises forever. Ashrei yoshvei beitecha, od yehalelu hasela.
That's right.
Join me. Ashrei yoshvei beitecha, od yehalelu hasela.
Ashrei, ashrei, ashrei yoshvei beitecha. Ashrei, ashrei, ashrei yoshvei beitecha.
You know what's coming, join us.
Ashrei, ashrei,
They will sing your praises
yoshvei beitecha. Ashrei, ashrei,
They will sing
ashrei yoshvei beitecha.
Happy, everybody.
Happy are those who dwell in your house. They will sing your praises forever. Happy are those who dwell in your house. They will sing your praises forever. Happy are those who dwell in your house. They will sing your praises forever. Happy are those who dwell in your house. They will sing praises forever. Shana Tova, Shana Tova.
Shana Shana Tova. So today is going to actually be a small taste of normalcy. Although, of course, we're sitting a little far away, we're a little more sparse, we're wearing masks, some of us are joining virtually. Because we don't have to have double services today, this is going to be the same service that you've actually grown accustomed to on the High Holy Days, which means that we're going to have a series of readers helping us lead our service today, really other than the Torah service, which is going to match what last night was, what yesterday was. It's going to feel very much like what you're used to in a second-day service, including a discussion, which you're going to see how we are going to do that technologically in a bit. And so with that, we're going to move into Elohai Nishama Shenatata Bi, combined with Asher Yatzar, one prayer that speaks about the beauty of having a body that works, and the other prayer thanking God for the soul that God has given us. It is pure and full of wonder.
You know it. All during Zoom. All during Zoom. I'm going to start referring to this last 18 months as Zoom. We sang this every Shabbos morning, so hopefully you know it really well by now. Join us. Elohai, Elohai.
Elohai, Elohai, Nishama, Shenatata Bi Tehorahi.
Let's try it again. Take our time.
Elohai, Elohai, Nishama, Shenatata Bi Tehorahi.
Atavirata.
Atavirata, Ataitzarta, Atanifachta Bi, Veata Mishamira Bikirbi.
Keep singing Elohai. Keep going.
Asher yatzar et Adam b'chokhma, u'baruvot nekavim nekavim, chalulim,
Atavirata.
Atavirata, ata yitzarta, ata nefachita bi. Ve'ata mishamira, u'yisem echad eihem.
Final time, Elohai.
Elohai, lehit kayem, mela'amod lifanecha, baruch ata, Adonai, rofech ol basar, u'mafli lasot.
Thank you.
So every morning we are supposed to celebrate a series of miracles in our lives, called Nasim B'chol Yom. These are small things. The ability to see, the ability to stand firm, the ability to even get ourselves dressed. And so I want to invite you, before we pray these traditional miracles, which you can find on page 124, to share a few of your own. And I'll repeat whatever you say, that way into the microphone for those who are joining us virtually so they can hear as well. And so, what is something you're thankful for, a small miracle in your life? Yeah. Waking up every day. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, for waking up every day. Somebody else. Yes. For family. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, for family. Somebody else. Yeah. For community. Our community. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, for our community. All right. So for finding your people, let's say. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, for finding your people. Rick. For the beauty of nature. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. For the beauty of nature. Andrew. For food. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. For food. And lastly, Perry. For health. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. For health. And save that enthusiasm for when we have our Torah discussion later. We're going to turn to 124 and we're going to chant responsively.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan l'sevivina le'achin ben yom u'ben laila.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, pokeach ivrim.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, matir asurim.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, zokef kefufim.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, roka haaretz al hamayim.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, she'asa li kol tzorchi.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamechin mitzadei gaver.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, malbish arumim.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, anoten le'ayef koach.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hama'avir shena me'enai u'tenuma me'afapai.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, she'asani b'tzelem Elohim.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, she'asani ben chorin.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, she'asani Yisrael.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, ozer Yisrael b'gvura.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, oter Yisrael b'tifara.
Amen. We're on the middle of page 131. God is my light and my refuge secure. Whom shall I fear? God is a stronghold of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? Adonai Uri, middle of 131.
Adonai Uri Vishi Mimira. Adonai Uri Vishi Mimira. Adonai Maoz Chayai Mimi Afchad. Adonai Uri join us. Adonai Uri Vishi Mimira. Adonai Uri Vishi Mimira. Adonai Maoz Chaya Mimi Echad. Adonai Uri. Adonai Uri. Uri Vishi. One more time. Join us, Adonai Ori, Adonai Ori Vishi, Mimira,
Adonai Uri Vishi,
Mimira, Adonai Maoz Chayai, Mimi Echad, Adonai Ori, Adonai Uri. Page 135, deep breath in, breathing in that light. I don't know what God is to you, but our tradition wants us to know that we are filled with it. And that word, hallelujah, is the expression of what we are filled with simply because we exist. This melody for hallelujah, for Psalm 150, I think expresses it the best. Follow the rabbi. Hallelujah, el kocha, hallelujah, irkia uso, hallelujah, digavuroko, hallelujah, rokulo, hallelujah, el kocha, hallelujah, irkia uso, hallelujah, digavuroko, hallelujah, 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 בתקע שופר, הללוהו, בנבל וכינור, הללוהו, בטוף ומחול, הללוהו, במינים ועוגב. It's supposed to mess with us a little bit, did it? It did. Hallelujah, בצלצלי שמה, הללוהו, בצלצלי תרועה, כל הנשמה, תהללויה, הללויה, 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 בתקע שופר, הללויה, בנבל וכינור, הללויה, בטוף ומחול, הללויה, במינים ועוגב. Feel like clapping again? Should we do it again? Hallelujah, בצלצלי שמה, hallelujah, בצלצלי תרועה, כל הנשמה, תהללויה, hallelujah, hallelujah. One more time. Hallelujah, בצלצלי שמה, hallelujah, בצלצלי תרועה, כל הנשמה, תהללויה, hallelujah, hallelujah.
We read responsively page 136. Blessed are we, blessed our gathering, as we open our hearts to the voice of the shofar. Together?
Happy are we who hear its call to return, the sacred trumpet of Teshuvah.
Blessed are we, held close by ancient sound that echo ledor vador from generation to generation. Blessed are we who hear in these blasts the sound of the voice of community.
Happy are we who know its embrace, its season of celebration, its quest for connection and purpose.
Holy is this gift of community. Blessed the act of belonging. We rise together for a taste of our shofar, and we call up Gary Blackman. Shema Yisrael, hear, O Israel. Divine abounds everywhere and dwells in everything. Its faces are infinite, its sources suffuses all. The many are one.
Tekiah, Shvarim Teruah, Tekiah,
Shkoach.
He'll be back.
Blessed is the soul reaching sound of the shofar. It proclaims the purpose of the day. Blessed is community, source of joy, solace, and strength to every living soul. We remain standing, page 141.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה
Amen.
בעולמה דברי חירותי וימליך מלכותי בחייכון וביומכון ובחיי דחול בית ישראל בגלה ובזמן קריב וימרו
Amen.
יהי שמי רבה מבורך לעולם ולעולמי עולמיו
יתברך.
יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר מה מתעשה ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתעלו לשמד קודשה לעילה ולעילה מכל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דברו בעולמו ואמרו
Amen. We remain standing, page 142.
ברכו את אדוני המבורך ולנצח לעולם ועד.
Please be seated.
Source of blessing, our eternal God, your power fills the cosmos, shaping light, creating darkness, making peace, and fashioning all things. Infinite light is preserved in life's treasure house. Lights from the darkness, said God, and it was so.
Well done.
Middle of page 144 in the English.
Really? We're not doing
I'm
it
sorry.
that
Yes, Yotzer Or, my bad.
I'm sorry, I have to speak up.
Yes.
Because I want to chant this text about light so badly.
I know.
We're going to chant together in the middle of page 142, and then we'll go. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech ha'olam Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech ha'olam Yotzer or uvorei choshech Oseh shalom shalom uvorei et ha'kol Yotzer Oseh shalom, shalom, uvore et hakol. Sometimes when you sing about light and peace and all things, you want to do it slow, like Tina Turner talks about. But then sometimes you also want to do it a little faster, like this one. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech ha'olam Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech ha'olam Yeah Yotzer or uvorei choshech Oseh shalom, shalom, uvorei et hakol. Yotzer or uvorei choshech. Oseh shalom, 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 uvorei et hakol.
In love, you bring light to the earth and its creatures. Your goodness renews the creation each day. Infinite, varied, and rich are your works, divine artist, all of them wrought with wisdom. The whole earth is teeming with life. Awestruck by the universe, work of your hands, let all life bless you, praise you, and celebrate the beauty of your lights. May you shine a new light on Zion, and may we soon be privileged to share in that light. Our praise to you, Adonai, creator of the cosmic lights.
Baruch atah Adonai yotzer hameorot. So before we move into... Uh-oh. No, I'm okay. Into this deep listening, the Shema, first we have to know we are loved. And that's what this is about. So... just be our echo. Ahava,
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 ahava rabbah,
Ahava Rabbah,
ahava,
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 Ahava Rabbah. Ahavtanu, love us, ahavtanu, try, ahavtanu, yes, absolutely, here we go, one more time, ahava,
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 ahava Rabbah. Ahavtanu, one more time. Ahavtanu.
All life springs from a single fountainhead. Listen, Israel. Know the oneness at the heart of multiplicity. With love and reverence, bear witness to Makor HaChaim.
Baruch atah Adonai, o habocher be'amo Yisrael be'ahava.
Page 150.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kivod Malchuto Leolam Vaed.
Page 152.
ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם
בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך וקשרתם לאות על ידך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך. We continue in silence from page 154 to page 158.
למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם אלוהים. אני
Adonai Elohechem.
Adonai Elohechem. Emet.
Top of page 161.
The beginning of your word is truth. If you exist at all, I know you can't abide hypocrisy. And most of all, you don't want prayers that lie. You'd rather get an honest fight than strings of empty platitudes. So I can't pretend or hide in pious phrases given to me by the past. It's hard to speak my own imperfect truth. In fact, the more I say, the less I seem to know you, and the farther away I get from you, whatever you might be. I've heard that what you really want is not more words. You want the heart. That might be more than I can give, but I can try.
Page 164. Mi kamocha ba'ilm Adonai, mi kamocha nedar b'kodesh, norot tehilot osef eleh.
שיר החדשה, שיבחו גאולים, לשמך לשפת הים. יחד כולם הודו ומליכו ואמרו,
Adonai yimloch leolam va'ed.
If you are able, we ask you to rise. צור ישראל, קומה בעזרת ישראל, ופדחינו לך, יהודה וישראל. גואלנו, אדוני צבאות שמו, קדוש ישראל ברוך אתה אדוני, גואל ישראל. אדוני שפתי תפתח ופי יגיד תהילתך.
Adonai sifatai tiftach ufi yagid tehilatecha.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו ואימותינו, אלוהי אברהם, אלוהי יצחק ואלוהי יעקב, אלוהי שרה, אלוהי רבקה, אלוהי רחל ואלוהי לאה, האל הגדול הגיבור והמלך, אל עליון, גומל חסדים טובים וקונה הכל, וזוכר חסדי אבות ואימהות, ומביא גאולות לבני בניהם, למען שמו באהבה. ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם ועזרת שרה. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיי מתים אתה רב לחושייה, מוריד הטל. מחיי לחיים בחסד, מחיי מתים ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא מועילים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר. מי כמוך בעל גיבור רחמים, זוכר יצוריו לחיים ברחמים. ונאמן אתה להחיות מתים, ברוך אתה אדוני מחיי המתים.
Amen. Please be seated. In a moment, we're going to move into the singing of Untitled Chapter, and from there, go into one of the more challenging theological pieces of our High Holy Day worship, where we talk about God deciding who will live and who shall die, and when we die, how we should die. And I was reminded the other day when I was teaching a class on a book that we read for Elul. I think I told this anecdote at the class, that the prayer that we just sang, the Avot, is an interesting prayer because it actually has an inconsistency that you might not have realized. And I didn't pick up on this until the president of my rabbinical school, David Ellenson, told this story about when he was a kid. Now to understand this story, you have to understand that there are two different characters in the Torah who get new names, kind of within a couple generations of each other. Avram becomes Abraham, right? And Jacob gets a name from God after wrestling with God, Yisrael. And Sarai also, yes, Sarai. Sarai becomes Sarah. I apologize for missing that. So and there were others also, but at least, yes. So he picks up on the fact, he grew up Orthodox, so Sarah wasn't in the equation in this anecdote, but he picked up on the fact when he was a kid that we say Elohei Abraham, God of Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, the God of Isaac, and then Elohei Yaakov, the God of Jacob. And so why is it that we don't match the old names to the old names? Why isn't it the God of Avram, Yitzchak, and Jacob, or Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yisrael? And he asked this question to his teacher, right? And he's in a yeshiva. I should clarify, that wasn't a dig at Orthodox Judaism. That was that in Orthodox Amidah there is no Sarah. That was my point. All right. So he raises his hand and he asks his teacher that question. And his teacher walks up to him, and without actually having an answer, probably because he didn't have an answer, he gives him a kiss on the forehead. And he says that kiss was the essence of Judaism, right? That there are things that are going to pop out to us, that are going to make us question, that are going to make us uncomfortable. And the act of simply raising the issue is actually more important than the act itself of getting the answer. His teacher didn't have the answer, but the beauty was in asking the question. The next set of prayers are basically a platform for questioning. Why do bad things happen to good people? What exactly is the tension between fate and free will? How is it that I am going to not be able to decide my full destiny for next year? What does it mean to have a metaphor of a God who counts us like sheep? At the end of the day, you ask that question, and you get the kiss on the forehead. There is no answer, but the Bible and the prayer book and all Jewish texts are meant to be a mirror in which to raise those questions for you. Allow yourself to be uncomfortable by these prayers, but just know that asking the questions about them is the Jewish act that should come from them. And so we rise. Actually, we're going to remain seated, page 174.
לתוקף קדושת היום, כי הוא נורא ואיום, ובוא תנסה מלכותך, וכל בחסד כיסך, ותשב עליו באמת. אמת. dayan u'mochiach v'yodei yavai v'chotem v'sofer u'moneh v'tizkur kol hanishkachot ותפתח את ספר הזיכרונות ותפתח את ספר הזיכרונות ומאליו יקרא וחותם יד כל אדם
Page 176. And so a great shofar will cry Tekiah. A still small voice will be heard. Angels in a whirl of fear and trembling will say, behold the day of judgment, for they too are judged. And in your eyes, even they are not blameless. All who come into the world pass before you like sheep before their shepherd. As a sheep considers the flock when it passes beneath the staff, you count and consider every life. You set bounds, you decide destiny. You inscribe judgments, page 178.
בראש השנה יכתבון וביום צום כיפור יחתמו בראש השנה יכתבון וביום צום כיפור יחתמו כמה יעבורון וכמה ייפרעון מי יחיה ומי ימות מי וקיצו ומי לא וקיצו בראש השנה יכתבו וביום צום כיפור יחתמו בראש השנה יכתבו וביום צום כיפור יחתמו מי ואש ומי ומים מי וחרב ומי וחיה מי ורב ומי וצמא בראש השנה יכתבון וביום צום כיפור יחתבון בראש השנה יכתבון וביום צום כיפור יחתבון ומי ומגפה, מי וחניקה ומי וסקילה, מי ינוח ומי ינוח. בראש השנה יכתבון, וביום צום כיפור יחתמון. בראש השנה יכתבון, יום צום כיפור יחתמו מי ישקיט ומי יטורף מי ישלב ומי יתייסר מי עני ומי ישיר מי יושפל ומי ירום.
On Rosh Hashanah, we plunge like swimmers into a sea of words. On Yom Kippur, the sea rises, then crests, and we emerge, sealed by the wax, warmed by the fire of braided candle. The new year is like a trailhead, opening wide before us, the day of fasting, narrow, breathless, so quick to close. We contemplate a new year, and this we know. Some of us will live, and some of us will die. Some will die young, and some very old, some by water, and some by fire, some by sword, and some by beast, some by hunger, and some by thirst, some by plague, and some by earthquake, some by stoning, and some by strangling. Some of us will feel at ease, some will be restless. Some will have peace of mind, some will have strife. Some will be tranquil, some will be tormented. Some will be raised high, some will be brought low. Some will have riches, and some will be impoverished. Even so, the way we act, the way we speak, the way we meet God's image in ourselves and in others, these things have great power to make our lives matter. Therefore, let us make whole the broken shards, green and thick the withering grass. Let the wind fill us with the urgency of life. Let dreams give birth to justice and goodness. God of holiness, God of hope, let us glimpse your truth as we attach our hopes to yours.
ותשובה ותפילה וצדקה מעבירים את רוע גזענה. כי שמך כן רעילתך קשה לכעוס ונועם לרצות כאילו תחפוץ במות המת כי אם בשובו מדרכו וחייו יד ים מותו וכחלו אם ישוב יד תקבלו אמת כי ידעו יוצרם ויודע איתם כי הם בשר ודם.
Middle of page 182.
We who are immortal, our origin is dust, and so is our end. We wear out our lives to get our bread, like broken vessels, like withered grass, like a flower that must fade, a shadow moving on, a cloud passing by, mere dust on the wind, a dream that flies away. But for you, ever-living sovereign, time has no limits. Your presence, unbounded by days and years, is everywhere, a glorious mystery none can decipher. Your name is worthy of you, and you are worthy of your name, and our name you have linked with yours.
We rise together, page 184.
נקדש את שמך בעולם כשם שמקדישים אותו בשמי מרום ככתוב על יד נביאך וקרא זה אל זה ואמר קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות מלוא הארץ כבודו אדיר אדירנו אדוני אדוננו מדיר שמך בכל הארץ ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו אחד הוא אלוהינו הוא אבינו הוא מלכנו הוא מושיענו והוא ישמיענו ברחמיו לעיני כל חי אני אדוני אלוהיכם ימלוך אדוני לעולם אלוהייך ציון לדור ודור הללויה לדור ודור
Dor vador,
לדור ודור
dor vador,
לדור ודור נגיד קודלך
לדור ודור,
לדור ודור,
לדור ודור,
לדור ודור,
לדור ודור נגיד גולך, ולנצח נצחים, ולנצח נצחים, קדושתך, קדושתך, מקדיש, ולנצח נצחים, ולנצח נצחים, קדושתך, קדושתך מקדיש. לדור ודור,
לדור ודור,
לדור ודור,
לדור ודור,
לדור ודור נגיד גודלך, לדור ודור,
לדור ודור,
לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיד גודלך, ושבחך אלוהינו, מפינו לא ימוש, לעולם,
לעולם ועד.
לעולם ועד, ושבחך אלוהינו, מפינו לא ימוש, לעולם, לעולם ועד, כי אל מלך גדול וקדוש אתה.
Please be seated. 187, we read responsively.
Holy is the dignity that is human, sacred the mystery we call divine.
Holy is the sacrifice made for those we love, precious the pains they take for us.
Sublime the glory of the heavens above us, sacred the beauty that glows within us.
Noble is the mind in search of meaning, the heart is happy that finds its way.
Awesome is the power that rules our being, holy the kinship that makes us one.
Page 192.
קדוש, קדוש אתה, ונורא שמך. והנהנו מבלעדיך, ככתוב ויגע אדוני צבאות המשפט. והאל הקדוש נקדוש בצדקו. ברוך אתה אדוני.
You are holy, your name is awe. There is nothing divine beyond you. As the prophet Isaiah taught, the source of all might is exalted through justice, the God of holiness made holy through righteousness. Baruch atah Adonai, HaMelech HaKadosh.
Amen.
Amen.
We turn to page 201.
May all be moved to serve you. Praise your presence, bless your name, your splendor and your justice. Sea and land shall then proclaim. Let us seek your face at sunrise. In the darkness, teach your ways. May your power and uniqueness be the essence of our days. When we speak about your glory, when we praise you for your might, those who hear will feel your presence. Turn from darkness to the light. Let seacoasts burst exultant. Hills embrace you with joyful sounds. When all people sing together, the world shall see your sovereign crown.
We're going to rise together. And I'll invite you, if you want, it's customary during what is called this Great Aleinu, for us to go down fully prostrate. And so if you want, feel free to make some rooms in the aisle or do it at your home as together we join. Page 202.
Aleinu, לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה לעצל בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמענו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא.
We remain standing. We're on page 205 as we prepare to hear the shofar sounded once again, a reading to get us ready.
Tikiyah, one whole note. Shevarim, truah, 3 broken notes, 9 staccato notes. Tikiyah, one whole note. My return to the right path has the power to make me whole again. Tikiyah, once I was whole. Shevarim, truah, in the wear and tear of living, I became broken and shattered. Tikiyah, my teshuvah has the power to make me whole again. Blessed are hearts that respond to the majestic music of the shofar. Blessed is the gift of life, the power of renewal that brings us to this day.
Thank you.
ברוך אתה, אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר קידשנו במצוותיו וציוונו לשמוע קול שופר. Big amen, amen, amen. Yes, we're ready. תקיעה. שברים תרועה. תקיעה. תקיעה. שברים. תקיעה. תקיעה. תרועה. תקיעה. Middle of page 207. הרשת שפתנו ירב לפניך, אל רם, רם ונישא. הרשת שפתנו ירב לפניך, אל רם, רם ונישא. מבין ומאזין, מביט ומקשיב לכל תקייתנו, ותקבל ברחמים וברצון סדר מלכויותינו.
Hayom Merat Olam. Today the world is born anew. This day the whole of creation stands before you to be judged. As we are your children, love us in the way of parents. As we are yours in service, guide us in the way of light of your justice, grace, and holiness. We continue in silence from page 208 to 220. If you're joining us at home, you can see on your screen a question will pop up. Feel free to use that for reflection, and for those in person, feel free to pause on a prayer as you chant quietly to give yourself a chance to explore the themes of these High Holy Days.
Continue to pray privately or out loud, feeling the nutrients of each other's spiritual awakeness this morning. So we get to be a real kahal in person. If ever I questioned whether communal worship was, so important, it is. Ose shalom bimroma, hu yaseh shalom aleinu. Ose shalom bimroma, hu yaseh shalom aleinu. Ose shalom bimroma, hu yaseh shalom שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו. הוא עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו. יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל. יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל. We hear you on Zoom too. יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל. יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל כל יושבי תבל ואמרו אמן.
We move now into the chanting of Avinu Malkeinu. We're on page 224, and we rise. Avinu Malkeinu, we stand in awe, we draw close in love. Avinu Malkeinu, power that passes through us and pervades all things. Avinu Malkeinu, the divine that is present within and among us. We chant responsively.
Avinu Malkeinu shema koleinu.
Avinu Malkeinu, we speak this sacred truth aloud.
Avinu Malkeinu chatanu lefanecha.
Avinu Malkeinu, we stand as one accountable for our sins.
Avinu Malkeinu chamor aleinu ve'al aleinu v'tapeinu.
Avinu Malkeinu, we yearn for true compassion for our children most of all.
Avinu Malkeinu kaledaver v'chevirav me'aleinu.
Avinu Malkeinu, may we resist the ravages of illness, fear, and despair.
Avinu Malkeinu kale kol tsar u'mastin me'aleinu.
Avinu Malkeinu, let us summon courage to withstand our enemies.
Avinu Malkeinu kotvenu b'sefer ha'chaim tovim.
Avinu Malkeinu, let the goodness of this gift of life be engraved upon our hearts.
Avinu Malkeinu chadesh aleinu shana tova.
Avinu Malkeinu, may we taste anew the sweetness of each day.
Avinu Malkeinu male yadeinu mi birchotecha.
Avinu Malkeinu, let us wake up to the blessing already in our grasp.
Avinu Malkeinu chaneinu vaneinu ki ein banu masil haseim manu tzedakah v'chesed v'hoshienu.
Avinu Malkeinu, however small our deeds, let us see their power to heal. May we save lives through compassion, generosity, and justice.
Avinu Malkeinu chaneinu vaneinu. Avinu Malkeinu chaneinu vaneinu ki ein banu masi. Aseh imanu tzedakah v'chesed. Aseh imanu tzedakah v'chesed ve'hoshienu. Avinu Malkeinu chaneinu v'aleinu. Avinu Malkeinu chaneinu v'aleinu ki ein banu masi.
We remain standing, page 227, for Seder Kriyat HaTorah.
Ein kamocha va'Elohim Adonai.
V'yein kema'asecha, malchutecha malchut kol olamim, u'memshaltecha bechol dor v'dor. Adonai melech
Adonai malach, Adonai yimloch, leolam vaed. Adonai oz le'amo yiten, Adonai yivarech et amo v'shalom. Avarachamim, etiva v'tzoncha, et Zion. Tivnei chomot, Yerushalayim. Tivnei chomot, Yerushalayim. Kivecha levad bataknu, melech Eram v'nisa, Adon olamim. Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum v'Chanun, Erech Apayim, V'Rav Chesed v'Emet, Notzer Chesed le'alafim, Notzer Avon v'Fesha, V'Chatat v'Naker. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Together on Shema. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh v'norah Shemo.
Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh v'norah Shemo.
Gadlul Adonai iti, uneromema Shemo yaktav. Lecha Adonai hagidula v'hagivura v'hatiferet v'hanetzach v'hahod. Ki chov hashamayim uvaretz, ki chov hashamayim uvaretz. Lecha Adonai hamamlacha v'amit naseh lecho lerosh.
Please be seated. So in a moment, we're going to be reading from the book of Genesis, chapter 22. And if you want to follow along with that, it's on page 240. This is perhaps the most famous portion in the whole of the Torah. It's interesting that the Pew, I guess, organization put out a study any number of years ago, and I don't know how long ago, but it asked any number of groups who read the Torah what was the most important Torah kind of portions, right? And by the way, if you ask Christians, you're going to find the answers are going to be wildly different. We're talking specifically 5 books here. Things like, for example, Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel, Noah's Ark, like didn't even make the top 5, basically, for Jews. For us, the most famous of the Torah portions is actually the one that we are about to read right now, in part because it is so troubling. And so, just as I spoke about the idea that within the question is the beauty, allow yourself to ask and to linger on the nature of God's test in asking Abraham to sacrifice his son, in asking why Abraham would do it, in asking why God would stop him at the last minute, in asking what their relationship might have been afterwards, and asking where Sarah was throughout all of this. And so allow yourself to dwell on these questions as we move into our Torah portion. And as we did yesterday, we'll have one aliyah with 7 different readers, or 7 different parts being read kind of in a line. through that one aliyah. And so we are pleased, as we do each service, to welcome up Robert Rich, who is our Gabbai this morning.
Ya'amod Rishon Reuven Mendel Ben Yitzchak Robert David Yamdu Kol Haba'alei Kriya Chana Bat Shalom V'Ata Rachel, the Honorable Lori Price Abrams, Shmuel Ben Melech V'Chana, Steve Lee, Ra'ela Rachel Bat Shabbatai Asher Yehudi Shulamit, Lisa Lesser, Chaim Ben Benjamin Varachel, Rick Abrams, Esther Razel Bat Aaron Hirsch Sarah, Ronnie Pressman, Elisheva Bat Eliu Bechana, Lisa Westreich.
Baruch Hu et Adonai Hamavorach.
Baruch Adonai Hamarach Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamavorach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam. Asher Bachar Bana Mikol Hamim V'natan Lanu et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Vayehi achar hadvarim ha'ela ve'ha'elohim nisa et Avraham vayomer elav Avraham vayomer hineni vayomer kach na et bincha et yichidcha asher ahavta את יצחק, ולך לך אל ארץ המוריה, והעלהו שם לעולה על אחד ההרים, אשר אומר אליך.
ויסכם אברהם בבוקר, ויחבוש את המרו, ויקח את שני נעריו איתו, ואת יצחק בנו, ויבקע את שעולה, ויקום וילך אל המקום אשר אמר לו האלוהים. ביום השלישי וישא אברהם את עיניו וירא את המקום מרחוק.
ויאמר אברהם אל נעריו, שבו לכם פה עם החמור, ואני והנער נלכה עד כה, ונשתחווה ונשובה עליכם. ויקח אברהם את עצי העולה, וישם על יצחק בנו, ויקח בידו את האש ואת המחכלת, וילכו שניהם יחדיו. ויאמר יצחק אל אברהם אביו, ויאמר אבי, ויאמר הנני בני, ויאמר הנה האש והעצים, ויעשה לעולה. ויאמר אברהם אלוהים יראה לו עשה לעולה בני, וילכו שניהם יחדיו.
ויבואו אל המקום
Asher amar lo Elohim. Vayiven sham Avraham et hamizbeach. Vaya'aroch et ha'itzim. Vaya'akod et Yitzchak beno. Vayasem oto al hamizbeach mimal la'itzim. Vayishlach Avraham et yado. V'yikach et hama'achelet lishchot et beno.
Vayikra elav malach Adonai min hashamayim vayomer Avraham vayone hineni vayomer el tashlach yadecha anacha ve'al ta'aseh lecha me'oma Ve'ataslo me'uma ki ata yadcha ki ata yadati ki yirei Elohim ata velo chasaktu ta et bincha et yichidecha mimeni.
Vayisa Avraham et einav, vayar v'hinei ayel achar, nechaz basvach bekarnav, vayelech Avraham, vayikra et ha'ayel, vayikach et ha'ayel, v'ya'alehu le'olat tachat beno. Vayikra Avraham, Shem hamakom hahu Adonai yireh, Asher yeyamer hayom. Behar Adonai yireh.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam nata betochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Shakoach. Thank you.
And now, in the presence of our Torah, we think of those who are ill and who are in need of healing, who are in need of a refuah shlema, complete healing of body, mind, soul, and spirit. And so if you've got someone that you're thinking of in need of healing, I'll invite you to say their name aloud now as my eyes go around the room. And if you're joining us virtually, feel free to say their name aloud in whatever space you're praying. We're together on page 245. Mi sheberach avotenu mikor habracha leimotenu. May the source of strength who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Mi sheberach imotenu mikor habracha le'avotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, rise together as we prepare to lift and dress our Torah. We're on page 246, and we call up our Hagba and our Galila, Ya'amdu, Hamagbiya v'Hagolelet. V'zot haTorah asher sam Moshe lifnei bnei Yisrael al pi Adonai biyad Moshe. Yismechu hashamayim, hashamayim, yismechu hashamayim, hashamayim, yismechu hashamayim, v'tagel haaretz. Yiramayam, 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 Umelo, Yiramayam, Yiramayam, Yiramayam. One more time on Yayalai, 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 Yarai. Now Shabbat. You may be seated. Elbows. Careful. The Haftarah for today is to be found on. We're beginning it on page 256. Can you take a tiny scoot that way? Thank you. And it is from the book of Yirmiyahu, of Jeremiah. You can, of course, follow along in the text and look at some of the commentaries as well. These texts are, as Rabbi Katz already said, meant to stir us up and shake us out of our complacency. And so they are meant to awaken us to whatever lives inside, the joy, the terrible pain. And here, the psalmist spells it out for us. When it's a really, really, really challenging world to live in, the psalmist teaches us go deeper inside to find the root of the grief. That's where the healing begins. And so we hear Ephraim lamenting in this text, and we hear the cries, and we wake up a little bit more to our own sadness, our own grief, because through it is where we come to wholeness. So here we go.
Our blessings can be found on page 247. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar b'nvi'im tovim v'ratzav v'divreihem hane'emarim be'emet. Baruch atah Adonai habocher b'torah uv'Moshe avdo uv'Yisrael amo uv'invi'ei ha'emet v'tzedek.
We begin on verse 15.
Ko amar Adonai Ko merama nishma nihi bechi tamrurim Rachel mevaka al baneha me'ana lihinachem al baneha Ki einenu.
Thus said the Eternal, a voice is heard in Ramah, wailing, bitter weeping. Rachel weeping for children, refusing to be comforted for children, for they are gone.
Ko amar Adonai min ikolech mi bechi ve'enaich midimah כי יש שכר לפעולתך, נאום אדוני, ושבו מארץ אויב.
Thus said the Eternal, keep your voice from weeping and your eyes from tears, for your labor shall have its reward, declares the Eternal. They shall return from the enemy's land.
ויש תקווה לאחריתך, נאום אדוני, ושבו בנים לגבולם.
And there is hope for your future, declares the Eternal. Your children shall return to their land.
שמוע שמעתי, אפרים מתנודד, יסרטני ואבשר, כי עגל לא לומד. חשיבני ואשובה, כי אתה אדוני אלוהי.
How I hear Ephraim lamenting, you have disciplined me like a wild calf, I've been disciplined. Help me return, and I will return, for you are my eternal God.
כי אחרי שובי ניחמתי, ואחרי היוודעי, ספקתי על ידך, בושתי וגם נכלמתי, כי נשאתי חרפך נעורי.
Now that I have turned back, I am filled with sorrow. Now that I am made aware, I strike my thigh in remorse, ashamed and humiliated. I carry the disgrace of my early life.
Haven yakir li Ephraim im ילד שעשועים, כי מדי דברי בו, זכור אזכרנו עוד, על כן חמו מעי לו.
Truly, Ephraim is my precious child, my delight, and though I speak against him, I remember him with tenderness. That is why my heart yearns for him. I will receive
Rachem
back in
Arachamenu,
love, declares the Eternal.
Blessing after can be found on page 259. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, tzur kol haolamim, tzadik bechol hadorot, ha'el ha'ne'eman, ha'omer ve'oseh, ha'medaber u'mekayem, shekol devarav emet v'tzedek. Al Torah ve'al havodah ve'al hanevi'im ve'al yom hazikaron hazeh shenatata lanu Adonai Eloheinu lechavod ultifaret. Al hakol Adonai Eloheinu anachnu modim lach umevarchim otach yitbarak shimcha b'fi kochai tamid leolam va'ed udvarcha emet v'kayam la'ad baruch ata Adonai Al kol haaretz hamikdash Yisrael v'yom hazikaron.
Amen. Shakrach. And so now we're going to move into our second of three major soundings, even though we had a taste at the very beginning as well. We're on page 268, and I'm going to invite us to rise for the sounding of the shofar.
Tekiah, Shvarim Torah, Tekiah, Tekiah, Shvarim, Tekiah, Tekiah, Trua, Tekiah,
Shkach.
Join us, middle of page 269. You know the words by now. Here we go. Areshet Sifateinu, Yarav Lifanecha, El Ram, Ram V'Niso. Areshet Sifateinu, Ram Lifanecha, El Ram, Ram V'Niso. Meivinu Mahazin, Mabitu Makshin, Lekol, Lekol, Tekiyatenu, Tekabel Berachamim, Berachamim, Uratzon, Seder Zichronoteinu.
Hayom Arat Olam, today the world is born anew. This day the whole of creation stands before you to be judged. We are your children, love us in the way of parents. As we are yours in service, guide us by the light of your justice, grace, and holiness. I'll invite us to remain standing as we return the Torah to the Ark, page 277.
Hashivenu, Hashivenu, Adonai Elecha, Venashuva, Venashuva, Chodesh, Chodesh, Yameinu Kekeder, Yameinu Kekeder.
Thank you. Shana Tova. You may be seated. So we're going to try something that we have never really tried before since the pandemic has begun. We are going to have a discussion. And because it's become such an important part of Second Day that we get to have a discussion together, that we're going to see if the technology is going to work. So in order to set up this discussion, I've got a Torah sheet, a text sheet. So if I'm going to bring these around to different sections, if you just want to have kind of pass them around, and I understand COVID-wise, if you don't feel comfortable taking one, that's totally fine. Most of the time, this is just a chance for you to kind of, use as a jumping off point. I'm going to do mostly summarizing anyways. So it should be coming around. I made more copies than I think we need. But so this tradition of having this conversation on the second day, sometimes we use the Torah as a jumping off point, but often it's really a chance for me to kind of reflect on an interesting tension that I'm feeling in ethics in the Jewish world. If you remember, 2 years ago, we spoke about the tension between kind of the universal and the particular, right? The it's about us Jews versus it's about the world. I actually have no recollection of what we spoke about on my first high holidays. Lev was 10 days old. It was a blur. But this High Holy Days, being my fourth High Holy Days and my third of these conversations, I've been doing a lot of thinking around one particular story. And, I actually am putting in a book proposal that I hope to be called Yochanan's Gamble, and hopefully it gets taken up by the publishing house that I sent it to. But I want to reflect on the nature of this gamble that Yochanan took. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you will by the end. And I want to talk about it in light of the question about how do we make change, and what are the changes when we ask for that we find acceptable. So this is a long story. We're not going to read this whole story, but it's here for you if you want to look at it. What I care about is the last 2 paragraphs of the story, but I'm going to summarize the story so that you understand what's going on. So situate yourself now in 70 CE, okay? There's been a war raging with the Romans since 66. The Jews are rebelling against the Romans. They actually came in earlier in 63 BCE. So they've been there for about 100 years when there was a squabble between 2 leaders about the succession of who was going to kind of be the king of the Jews in the 1st century BCE. And so they bring in Pompey, the Roman general, to mediate between them. Pompey looks around, realizes that he kind of likes Israel, and decides, well, I'd like this to be part of the Roman Empire, and the Romans stick around. They stay. And the Romans have been there now for 100 years. Now, the Jews are upset about this. They don't like it. And there's 2 camps that form. One camp says, look, we understand the Romans are here. We're going to have to live with it. Let's just live with it. Let's figure out how to get along with them. The other camp, which we call the Zealots, and by the way, there are different schools of Zealots, they said, no, let's go to war. Let's beat them. We've got God on our side. We are going to be able to kick the Romans out. Now, as you know, our ragtag bunch of Jews living in Jerusalem have nothing against the Roman Empire. At this point, when we start, we're fighting Nero, right? Nero dies. There's a whole battle of succession afterwards. 4 years later, there's a podunk emperor of Rome. There's the year of 4 emperors, it's called. But at the end of the day, the Jews kind of have no place really fighting the Romans. What they really have a place doing is waiting the Romans out. By the way, it worked for us in 722 BCE when the Assyrian army came and sacked Jerusalem. Jerusalem is on a pretty high mountain. It's got pretty big walls. If you've got enough food and water in Jerusalem, you can wait out any army until some plague hits them and then they have to leave, right? But the Zealots don't want that. And in the first paragraph of this story, the Zealots burn all of the wheat, so that the people have to open the doors and they have to fight. And then if you see there's an ellipses, there's a whole long, drawn-out section in the Talmud, which is what we're reading, about the people having to kind of scrounge for food and what the poverty looks like once those stores of wheat are burnt. And then you find the emergence of Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai. So he goes first to one of the leaders of the Zealots, who happens to be his nephew, and he basically says to him, what should I do? And the nephew says to him, go and pretend to be dead and have all of your students carry you in a bier, right, in a coffin, and take you out right past the Zealots who are guarding the city gates. They would say that nobody alive can leave because they need to amass the army inside to fight the Romans. But if you're dead, they might let you be buried outside. So they do that. They put a stinky piece of fish or meat or something in the coffin, and they bring him out. And by the way, the Zealots don't want to let him out. They want to prove that he's dead. They want to stab him or throw him off a cliff or something like that. But the students convince them to let him out. And finally, he gets out of the gate. And because this is a myth, it's kind of a sacred myth, and what I'm about to tell you, probably scholars have debunked what I'm about to tell you, probably didn't happen. But because it's a myth, no sooner does he finish leaving than he manages to somehow go and get an audience with the basically head general, whose name is Vespasian. Now, if you know Roman history, you know who Vespasian was. Vespasian becomes the emperor of Rome at the time when Jerusalem is destroyed. He's not the emperor yet. I told you this is the year of the 4 emperors. And so basically what happens is Yochanan enters, and you can see it's the beginning of the bold, and he says to Vespasian, basically, blessed are you, king. And Vespasian says, what are you doing calling me a king? I'm not a king. And in the conversation, he says to him, look, Yochanan says, there's a prophecy that says that someone really mighty is going to destroy Jerusalem. And you're sitting at the city gates ready to destroy us. Well, the mightiest of people happened to be the emperor. And therefore, there's no way that this prophecy could even be true unless you were the emperor yourself. So no sooner does that happen, because this is sacred mythology here, that a messenger comes in and says to him, oh, by the way, the emperor is dead and you're the new emperor. And Titus, your son, can become the kind of head general who's going to be the one to take on Jerusalem. And he looks at Yochanan, and after this kind of series of funny banters where, it's humorous, his feet grow because of tidings being good for the bone, and Yochanan heals his foot and shrinks it so he can fit in his boots again, and there's a whole story there that you have in front of you. By the way, if you're at home, I think it's available on a link that should be as part of the description on YouTube. If it's not, hopefully you're still following along. He turns to Yochanan, and he says to Yochanan, look, you predicted I was going to be the king. I imagine that probably because of that prediction, maybe that's why I became the emperor. You healed my foot that grew when I became the king and helped me out. So I'll tell you what, ask me for anything. Before I go off and become the emperor and get crowned in Rome, I'll do whatever you ask. And Yochanan pauses, right? And here's the last two paragraphs. Let's read through it together. Vespasian then said to Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai, I will be going to Rome to accept my new position, and I will send someone else in my place to continue besieging the city and waging war against it. But before I leave, ask something of me that I can give you. Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai said to him, give me Yavna and its sages, and do not destroy it. Spare the dynasty of Rabban Gamliel and do not kill them as if they were rebels. And lastly, give me doctors to heal Rabbi Tzadok. Rav Yosef read the following verse about him, and some say that it was Rabbi Akiva who applied the verse to Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai. Quote, I am the Lord who turns wise men backwards and makes their knowledge foolish, as he should have said to him, leave the Jews alone at this time. So imagine. I'm going to unpack this paragraph so you understand what's going on. Imagine, Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai has the ability to ask the new emperor of Rome anything. And what he doesn't ask for is, why don't you end the siege on Jerusalem? Right? Why don't you guys pack up and go home? The Roman Empire is really big. We don't really need you here in Jerusalem with us. And even if you were here, at least, you know what? Let us live. Maybe take out a few of the zealots, but don't destroy our temple. But notice he doesn't say that to him. Instead, he asks for three things. Now, there's brilliance in the three things that he asks for, right? The first thing he asks for is a little plot of land called Yavna, which is a little bit northwest of where we're talking about in Jerusalem, if you know the geography. And he basically says here, look, when you destroy Jerusalem, give me a place to refound Judaism. And that's, by the way, exactly what he does. He takes the kind of rabbinic class that's out, and with the temple destroyed, you can no longer talk to God in the way you used to, right? Back in the day, when you wanted to talk to God, what would you do? You'd make a sacrifice. So the rabbis create the whole system of prayer that we did today, right? They also invent many of the ways to celebrate the holiday cycle, since we can't be sacrificing, which was the main part of celebrating many of the holidays. They also end up creating the Mishnah and the Talmud, which basically is the definitive Jewish statement on what law should be. They teach us how to celebrate Rosh Hashanah correctly, or at least the way that we do now, Yom Kippur, at least the way that we do now, Sukkot, at least the way that we do now. They also deal with the laws of what you should do on Shabbat and how to keep kosher. You may not realize it, but the laws of Shabbat are told to be hanging a mountain by a thread. In the Torah, it says maybe a handful of times, 4, 5, 6 times, how you should actually celebrate Shabbat. All the stuff about not cooking, all the stuff about being careful about carrying, the Eruv, everything you know about Shabbat, that all is from the rabbis, right? They reinvent Judaism, and he understands that if you're going to lose Jerusalem, get that plot of land and spend some time remaking. And then, like Lincoln, he does something extraordinary. The other two asks are taking political rivals of his and bringing them in. And each, by the way, stands for something. Rabban Gamliel is a brilliant choice because although he is a total jerk in the Talmud, and when Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai dies, he's a little younger than Yochanan ben Zakkai, he makes Yochanan ben Zakkai's students' lives like a living hell. He still has this amazing tie that no one I've ever seen is able to do. He somehow has feet firmly in the Zealot community and the Romans like him at the same time. And so he's able to speak both of those languages when they bring him in. And then you've got Rabbi Tzadok, who not only is a faith healer, someone who was able to kind of stave off the Romans just by fasting himself, but he also, the word Tzadok is from the same root as the word Sadducees. And if you know the history of Jews at that time, the Sadducees were the priests. So the priests, when they suddenly were out of work, when the temple would be destroyed, at least have one of their ilk that they could look to bring them in. So by making three requests, he not only saves Judaism, but he puts a team of rivals together that he can politically use to bring in all of the rest of the people who are wounded and who are hurt by the destruction of the temple. It's smart, but the problem is it's incremental. Right? He doesn't go for broke. He doesn't keep his integrity intact. He doesn't ask for the thing that he really wants. He allows himself to take a step forward, but it's not the step that everybody needs right then and there, right? It might be visionary toward the future, but it is not saving the temple. It is not saving Jerusalem. And so after this critique of him at the end, right, he's the kind of guy who turns wise men backwards and makes their knowledge foolish. There's this last postscript to explain why he did it. Why didn't Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai make this request? He maintained that Vespasian might not do that much for him, and there would not even be a small amount of salvation. Therefore, he made only a modest request in the hope that he would receive at least that much. I want to put Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai up against another paradigm of morality in Judaism, which is that of the prophet. Right? If you think about it, all the prophet has to do is they just have to speak the truth, and they got to speak God's word accurately. It almost doesn't matter if people listen to him. On the whole, prophets were failures, right? There's a few that managed to get through and managed to, at their time, get the king or the leader to listen, to heed, to change. But for the most part, they're like Jeremiah. They're screaming into the ether, and people are making fun of them and laughing at them while they're doing it, throwing trash at them, putting them in stocks, even putting them in prison. Right? A prophet, it doesn't matter politically whether what they're doing is going to get them to an end result. It doesn't matter whether or not they change hearts and minds. It only matters if their integrity is intact, if they leave with clean hands. But a political leader sometimes has to dirty their hands. They have to make sacrifices that are deep in order to get what they want. And they have to be okay with incremental steps forward, understanding that sometimes that even includes steps backwards, because it's better to get something than to have clean hands but to get nothing at all. You can put the greatest prophets up against Rabban Yochanan, completely different ways of seeing the world. And so I want us to reflect for a moment on what we think the world needs right now. You've got Yochanan ben Zakkai, who I admire tremendously for his ability to not go for broke, because he knew that if he had one request and he squandered it, he asked for what Vespasian would not give, Judaism would be done, right? On the other hand, do you hold out for the things that you really want, even if they are not politically feasible? So take a moment, and for those who are at home, feel free to discuss if you've got others around you in your household as well, or just ponder the question. I'll give you a chance to think about it with your neighbor, and then I'm going to invite people to line up here. You have to speak into the microphone so that those who are at home can hear you. We'll turn this so that the camera can see you as well. We'll line up, and we'll take a few thoughts from those who are congregated. So let's spend about 2-3 minutes, and let's talk about this. Where do we need more Yochanan ben Zakkais? Where do we not? Where is it good that we have prophets just speaking the truth and going for broke? And where do actually they get in the way? And so turn to your neighbor, and I'm curious what you have to say about that question. All right. So I want to hear some thoughts. This was just a kind of a gut check to hear from you. So I know it's a lot less intimidating just to stand up and to say something, but I want to make sure that those at home can hear, and I imagine people are going to have more than just a one-sentence response. So try to keep your answers brief, but why don't you come line up, and I want to hear what you have to say. So come on, somebody from any group, what were some of the things that you talked about? All right. And just make sure to keep your masks on as you go.
Commented on the fact that this is very similar to our current political situation, where Joe Biden has the plan that he would like to put in place, but even some members of his own party are not supportive enough. So we will see whether he asks for Save the Temple versus he asks for something that he has a good idea that he can get, but it might not be as much as he wants.
Good, good. I mean, it's funny, I immediately jumped to the infrastructure bill when I first read this as well, a number of months ago. What do you, do you take the $1 trillion bill or do you go for the $4 trillion bill, right? What do you do? This is the calculus going on, and I'm not going to answer that question, right? But it is the conversation going on in the Democratic Party right now, right? And so it's an interesting thing that this debate was happening 2,000 years ago, and at the core, it's still going on. Yeah.
So my group talked about climate change and the needs for addressing those issues. And we talked about it in terms of what we really need are major radical changes to really have the full impact and to be effective. And we were talking about the prophet being the young woman Greta Thunberg, who's really speaking big picture and radical change and is out there. But we also need is the small steps that people will accept so that change can ultimately really happen. We need legislators who will be willing to make those steps, to pass legislation, for people to be on board to really address the big picture.
Thank you. Thank you.
We were talking about at least part of the answer being in the text itself. It says, Vespasian says, ask something of me that I can give you. He doesn't have the choices to give everything, but he has something that he may be able to give. We also talked about how this might relate to Israel right now, things that we may want but can't have, like maybe the Temple Mount, like maybe Judea and Samaria, that we might simply think are ours but we can't have. Also, I thought that this is retrospective support for the Academy at Yavne and for Rabbinical Judaism, as you said.
Yeah, it is. And again, thank you. And I want to say also, right, if this is a myth, and as I said, scholars very much believe that it is, that this did not happen the way that it's spoken about, then the question is, why would we choose a failure on his part to speak up as the founding myth of Rabbinic Judaism? And the answer is because this is like exactly the way the rabbis want to think. If you read the Talmud, if you read Mishnah, if you read writings from the 2nd century through the 5th century, what you're going to find is like this kind of strategic way of thinking, the give and take, the compromise, the political maneuvering, like that's the essence of the world that he came from. And so it makes sense that the founding act of that world would be that way of thinking. And I got to tell you, in our world, I don't think we value it very much, even though I actually think it's got a tremendous place beside the prophet.
I think a lot of people have touched on what we were saying, that there are people who take positions that are very far on one side or the other, and maybe by staking that position, you get your ideal of what it is, but that by trying to figure out what you need, maybe you can then at least find some commonality and reach some kind of solution. It's been talked about, what you were talking about, climate change. We didn't talk about that, but I do think yeah, you need to get a big picture, but you also do need to take those baby steps. Or as I said, you can't always get what you want. No, you can't always get what you want. You can't always get what you want, but if you try sometimes.
Nice.
I can't follow that. And actually, I was going to say something very similar to what Bob said, that to me, it's not even just about a specific thing, but the whole idea that in our country, I will just speak for our country right now, it seems like it's sort of the same question, like people are just so solidified in their sides that nobody is willing to take incremental steps to try to understand each other and try to see where the other side is coming from. So, yeah, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Good.
I think what struck me the most here was the question that said, ask something of me that I can give you. And I stopped and thought about where we all are emotionally right now. Forget politics for just a second, which seems almost impossible. But what we've all been through over the past, 21, 22 months, and it feels like everyone has gone through some version of extreme loss. There isn't anyone that hasn't lost something. We've all had to grieve. Loss of routine, loss of financial stability, loss of someone we love, loss of access to something. We've all gone through something really hard, and our lives are not the same. And everyone in this room, there's no one in this room who hasn't said to someone, what can I do to help you? Nobody. And if you haven't, you're a jerk. But anyway, in the meantime, it's hard to answer that question. We all want to reach out. We've all said, what can I do for you? And the question itself is so big. It's nearly impossible to answer. And so breaking it down into little parts, even a small answer, even one small thing that you can tell someone you need is not just a gift to you, but a gift to someone else. And so I actually think when we say, tell me what you need, it's too big of a question. We can't boil the ocean for anybody. And so I actually look at Rabban Yohanan ben Zakkai, I probably butchered that, and I think in the hardest moment, he did exactly what we all need to try to do.
Shkach.
In our group, we talked about the story in the context of Thurgood Marshall and Ruth Bader Ginsburg. how they each and their organizations, the ACLU and other social justice organizations, had very specific strategic plan to progress in the area as far as Thurgood Marshall in racial justice and Ruth Bader Ginsburg in the context of women's rights. And they took cases which people often thought were, what are you doing? This doesn't seem you're getting much accomplished, but it was on purpose. They took step by step until they reached a bigger goal. And they took it from lower courts all the way up often to the Supreme Court. And that's how we've progressed in both those areas till today.
So I think we've got two more, 1, 2, I think, right? And so we'll end there. Oh, Steve, we'll give 3 more, okay?
Well, I discussed this with the rabbi yesterday, and that is that I think the Palestinians have the other end, and that is we were offered the 47 partition, and they wanted it all, and they didn't get anything. And in 67, they were offered the West Bank, and they wanted it all, and they didn't get anything. And a lot of us who were around, at least during 67, I was barely alive in 47, say, well, why don't you at least take what you can get and show the world what you can do? And that they didn't take it, those of us who were around in 67 are saying, you know, we were so optimistic that the Palestinians would take the West Bank and make the West Bank bloom and show what they could do with their entire, statecraft, and instead they didn't do it. That's the converse of the story. The converse is, if you ask for everything, you risk getting nothing.
And history is filled with those examples. One of the challenges, though, is that, if you ask for everything, there are going to be times where you get everything, right? And so sometimes you never know how history is going to turn out. And people who ask for everything sometimes need to hold out for that thing, because the first time they ask for it, they don't get it, right? And so that's the hardest part of the gamble, the calculus, is knowing when to say yes and when to say no.
So I was thinking more in terms of our Torah stories. And so who in our Torah history followed instructions and saved some but not all, and that was Noah, right? The rabbis are really hard on Noah because Noah didn't do what Abraham did and didn't negotiate for the rest of the people. Noah gave God what God asked, said, what can I do for you? And Noah did it. But it's interesting to me that Rabban Yochanan did what Noah did. He only took what he thought he could get to start the whole community over again and let the rest of them die without arguing in their favor. Whereas both Abraham and Moshe argued in favor. When God was frustrated with the people and wanted to destroy them all, Moshe said, no, don't do that. And yet here, Rabbi Yochanan, in a way that actually saved all of us in that we're here today, asked for that little bit and didn't argue on behalf of everyone, which seems inconsistent.
Yeah.
And those same rabbis criticized Noah for the same things that Yochanan ben Zakkai did to create the foundation for the rabbis. So it's just...
Yeah, it's very interesting. I guess the difference, and Steve will have the last word, the difference is that we were arguing with God in the stories in the Bible, and he was addressing a tyrant who had his fate in his hands, right? And so knowing your audience is a big part of that as well.
And deciding who to choose as your leaders.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Or, or if the leaders are thrust upon you in the case of, let's say, the Romans.
So Mary and I were wondering, why ask this question on this day? And the question, why didn't Rabbanan Yochanan ben Zakkai make this request? It reminded us of a request that Abraham didn't make in the Akedah. Why didn't he request to God that he spare his son? And as you were saying earlier today, it's not necessary for us to have the answers, but we have to ask that big question.
Good. Good. So I want to actually, Steve, answer the question that you asked, though, about which is, why are we having this conversation on this day, right? Besides the fact that I kind of get carte blanche in the holidays to speak about whatever I'm thinking about, right? Why did I talk about Israel yesterday, right? But, and where I think the community is and what they need to hear. At the end of the day, if we're really doing the hard work of the high holidays, we're taking into account of the kind of people that we want to be, the kind of leaders that we want to be, and that we're trying to decide, you know, when we are effective in change. And a big part of living a Jewish life is advocating for a better world, right? It's trying to make a change for the world that you want to see and that you want to live in. We have a lot more control over the household that we live in, over the self that we are in making the change. But every one of us is involved in society itself. And we have to decide at any given point whose voices we're going to listen to. Are they going to be the prophet, or are they going to be the sage being the kind of incrementalist, the Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai's, right? Are we going to follow the prophet, or are we going to follow the sage when we seek to vote or when we seek to support legislation, right? Are we going to hope to shape a country that is more prophet or that is more sage? What does this country need more? And so because we're constantly looking to change and to grow during this season, trying to figure out the approach, the lens in which we use to see the world is important. Now, if a world doesn't have prophets, it's going to be dead, right? It's going to be dull. It's going to be so incremental that it loses that majesty. Every generation needs its Ruth Bader Ginsburgs. It needs its Martin Luther King Jr.'s, right? It needs those people to see a world that no one can imagine, to completely shift the conversation so that people are ready for it. Like, you need prophets to push you. On the other hand, if you have a society completely full of prophets, we're going to be standing on our soapboxes shouting past each other, unable to actually do anything. And so the goal is to meet the prophetic vision with Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai's pragmatic, practical outlook on life. And if those two things can be married together, then there is no end to the world that can be built. Shana Tova.
Perfect segue. I'm going to invite, it's the only time that I will use the word sisters, including my wife in this one, but
and the last time you're going to say
the
that.
very last. Sisters in song. It's where we are. We are living on this very, very narrow bridge. And sometimes it feels really narrow, and sometimes there's enough room. And it's spacious somehow. So we'll see. But at least we're all on it together. כל העולם כולו גשר צר מאוד, והעיקר לא לפחד כלל. כל העולם כולו גשר צר מאוד, והעיקר לא לפחד כלל.
The world is a very narrow bridge, but the most important thing is not to be afraid. All the world is a very narrow bridge, but the most important thing is not to be afraid.
To my left and to my right, the jaws of the abyss, by its twinkling teeth I chart my course. Fear singing in my ear, to my left and to my right, the jaws of the abyss, by its twinkling teeth I chart my course. Fear singing in my ear.
גשר צר מאוד, והעיקר לא לפחד כלל כל העולם כולו.
To my right,
גשר
jaws of the
צר
abyss,
מאוד.
by its twinkling teeth that chart my course. Fear singing in my ear, to my left and to my right. Jaws of the abyss, by its twinkling teeth that chart my course. Fear singing in my ear.
כל העולם כולו. גשר צר מאוד, והעיקר לא לפחד כלל. How can I be safe on a narrow bridge? How can I be strong till the day I die? How can I be safe on a narrow bridge? How can I be strong till the day I don't look down?
Keep going.
Don't look down.
Keep growing.
Don't look down. Keep moving. Don't look down. Keep going. Don't look down. Keep growing. Don't look down. Keep moving. Join us. Don't look down. Don't look down. Keep going. Don't look down. Keep growing. Don't look down. Keep moving. One more time. Don't look down. Keep going. Don't look down. Keep growing. Don't look down. Keep moving. All the world is very גשר צר מאוד, והעיקר to be afraid. לא לפחד כלל כל העולם כולו.
To my right, jaws of the abyss, by its twinkling teeth that chart my course. Fear singing in my ear,
כל העולם כולו. גשר.
We move now into the final of our 3 full shofar soundings. We're on page 284, and I'll invite us to rise as we move into the concluding section of our service.
תקיעה שברים תרועה תקיעה תקיעה שברים תקיעה תקיעה תחועה תקיעה גדולה Last time הרשת צוותנו ירב לפניך אל רם רם ונישא הרשת צוותנו ירב לפניך אל רם רם ונישא מבין ומאזין מביט ומקשיב לכל תקיעתנו ותקווה ברחמים ברחמים וברצון סדר שפרתנו.
Hayom Harat Olam, today the world is born anew. This day the whole of creation stands before you to be judged. As we are your children, love us in the way of parents. As we are yours in service, guide us by the light of your justice, grace, and holiness. We remain standing as we move into Aleinu, page 286.
Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol, latet gedula liotzer breshit, shelo asanu kigoye haratzot, velo samanu כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא.
Page 289. May the time not be distant, our God, when all shall turn to you in love, when corruption and evil shall give way to integrity and goodness, when lies and bigotry shall no longer enslave the mind, nor idolatry blind the eye. So may all created in your image become one in spirit and one in friendship, forever united in your service. Then shall your dominion be established on earth and the word of your prophet fulfilled. Adonai will reign forever and ever.
ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד.
We're going to remain standing as we turn to page 292. And our thoughts turn to those that we've loved and that we've lost. As my eyes go around the room, I'll invite you to share names of people that you've lost recently or those who are just in your thoughts and your minds today. And if you're joining us virtually, feel free to say their names aloud wherever you're praying. Page 292. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei Rabbah, v'yamad divrach yiratzeh v'yamlech malchuteh, v'chayachon v'yomechon v'chayet l'chol Beit Yisrael, b'agala v'zman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mavarach le'olam olamei almaya, yiparach v'yishtabach v'yipa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemid kudashah b'rechu. Leila uleila min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechamata, damiram bi'ama v'imru amin. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu ve'orko Yisrael v'imru amin. O seshalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu ve'orko Yisrael v'imru amin. May the source of peace send peace to all who mourn and comfort to all who are bereaved. As together we say, Amen. Please be seated. So a few announcements before we are going to conclude. After these announcements, we'll have a closing song, and then I'll invite you to just stay seated for one more moment because we have challah over there. We're going to make motzi. So following services, we have a really wonderful brunch that we have every second day. We're excited to be able to bring it back to you in the tent outside, we think in a very safe way, with people serving rather than taking food. So don't take food. Allow the servers to get there first so that they can make sure that they can serve you the food. In addition to that, I want to give a big thank you, apropos of this lunch, to Wendy Grossman. She's not here right now. She must be getting lunch set, but make sure to go and say thank you to her. She does it every year, and it's really just a wonderful addition to our second day festivities.
Indeed.
In addition, Yom Kippur is coming up before we know it. So next week it begins. Make sure if you haven't yet registered for your tickets that you do that. That way we know which services you're coming for. You got a chance to see what it's going to be like COVID-wise. It's pretty much exactly the same. And so we've got services out in the tent for our grade school kids, our Biachad services, plus Tot. We've got services here, Kol Nidre, 2 sessions, 2 seatings. Yom Kippur morning, 2 seatings. And then in the afternoon, because it's a lighter crowd, 1 seating for Yizkor for the afternoon service, and then for Ne'ilah. We've got many other things going on. I'll invite you to make sure to check out our website, our e-blasts. You'll find everything, including what's happening for Sukkot and Simchat Torah. Make a point to take a look at this packet that you have. You can see the names. We didn't call them up one by one of all of those who were involved in our service and what they did. And a big thank you to our leadership, to our board, and especially to Alan Berner, and to our president, Josh Katz, who worked tirelessly to make sure that this service was put together and to help populate this sheet right here, in addition to all the many other things that they do. Also to our staff, make a point if you see Gwen or Glenn to say thank you to them, and to our executive director, Michelle W. Malkin, who just walked into the room now, who also was emailing me the other day at 1 in the morning because she was working so hard on the high holidays. And so thank you to Michelle for all of your work. And though they're not here, make sure to reach out to Lori and to any other members of our staff to say thank you as well.
Absolutely. A big shout out to the tireless effort of these guys here and of all of the contributions musically, the choir on the evening services, they'll be back next week, and just all the ways in which our community just is so talented and so filled with so much creativity and beauty.
And to Ethan, to his team for live streaming today. Make sure also on your way out, one final thing, to grab a bag if you haven't already, fill it up with food, bring it back on Yom Kippur. It's an important piece of what we do. Amy Winkleman is heading up that initiative. And if you want to help her unload the next day, if you want to help man the truck, she's right here and she's always looking for volunteers. So with that, we are going to close with Birkat HaGomel. This year, look, we've lost people over these past 18 months, but yet there is something, especially in a pandemic, that allows you to say, I am still here. And I haven't yet benched Gomel after the most scary drive home I've ever had on that torrent a few days ago, even coming home from the synagogue at 9 that night. And so every one of us have somehow been close to death this year. And so it's customary when you are to thank God for the ability to still be here. And so we conclude with Birkat HaGomel before we say Motzi.
And I've been given the privilege just to say a brief word about this piece of music. I'm the composer of this piece, and it's been sung in this community for many, many years. And I've never heard it because I'm out in the out with Biachad when it's been sung here. And I had to relearn the words to be able to share it with you tonight because I've never, ever till this moment had a chance to sing it publicly. And so it's very powerful for me as a composer to be able to share this with my community at this moment in this place.
So we start with Selah.
It's for you.
Selah, Selah.
Blessed are you, Adonai, you who brings us all good things. May you be with us now and grant us goodness forever. May you be with us and grant us goodness.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech HaGomel HaGomel HaChayavim tovot asher gmalani kol tov. Join me, amen. Amen. One more time. Amen. It may be that it's your blessing to say that you have in fact gotten yourself to a place where real goodness is flowing through you and you feel it and you're ready. And if you feel that way, then you can join in fully with these words. And if not, you can just sing an amen later. So we sing, Mishegamalcha kol tov, Hu yigamalcha kol tov Selah. The one that is the source of all goodness, bring goodness still here at all times, this day, every day. We gotta ask the big picture, right? Let's ask for the big picture. Here we go, the two parts now. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hagomel hachayavim tovot asher gmalani kol tov Selah. Amen. Amen. Let's do that one more time. Baruch
המלך חייבים טובות אשר גמלני כל טוב אז אמן. Same thing. Amen. Baruch אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם המלך חייבים טובות אשר גמלני כל טוב. This really is going to be the last one. Amen. Now we're going to sing. Amen.
משם גלהם כל טוב הוא יגמלך כל טוב משגמלך כל טוב הוא יגמלך כל טוב משגמלך כל טוב
Shana Tova. And so we'll join together. And by the way, if you didn't RSVP for lunch, we have so much food, so please come and take some home with you. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen. So wish somebody a Shana Tova, and we'll see you outside.
And I couldn't help